Okay, so we are still on inflation. I want to explain to you the dangers of inflation and the dangers that we are facing in 2023 as far as the economy is concerned. Because I say that in the United States and in Europe and in Asia, they're grappling with high levels of inflation. It's a global phenomenon right now. Even here in Africa, we have some level of inflation. Also, another thing is the United States Federal Reserve is raising interest rates rapidly, increasing valuations of the US dollar, also exacerbating inflationary pressures to emerging markets and frontier markets like Zimbabwe, South Africa, SADC, and the like. Now, as if this is painful enough, now what I see being more painful will be next year, because as the Federal Reserve in the United States is raising rates, it's going to cause a recession in the USA. Now, listen very well. If there is a recession in the United States, it means that uh, Chinese products or European products or the Mercedes Benz, whatever that is bought in the United States, not a lot of people will be buying. That's what the recession is. Recession means that if business is slowed down and not a lot of people are buying, so people stop buying stuff. So America being the biggest economy in the world, which is the biggest buyer in the world, and Europe being the second biggest economy in the world, if it also goes on to a recession, both of them, it means that factories also in China will go down. Now, if there is less demand in factories, it means that there is less demand for commodities. African nations like Zimbabwe and South Africa that rely on exports that are commodities like chrome, from of mining and oil. The prices of oil, the prices of diamonds, prices of anything that is extractive is going to come down, meaning that our foreign currency receipts will be low. At the same time, because of this strong US dollar, our exports become higher because prices from foreign countries are higher because the US dollar is stronger. At the same time, we're getting less US dollars because of the recession in the United States. So government revenues will be less. Therefore, governments will be running deficits. But now the problem is, how would the governments be able to finance those deficits? So one thing that other governments will do is that they will print their own money. If they print their own money, it even increases on inflationary pressures on their own currencies, leading to hyperinflation across all of Africa. Other governments will be able, if they're able to borrow from the markets, financial markets, the interest rates will be so high that this is gonna cause a burden in the future. So you see, Africa next year is getting into this kind of economic trap. Picture that in Zimbabwe. Put on top of it in Zimbabwe, put an election year on that matter. Going to the election with ZANU PF uh, being forced to go to an election in a high inflationary environment, which tilts the scale towards a triple C victory. At the same time, you do know that the mining sector is a problem in Zimbabwe. Most of the politicians, the Lord told me that, you know what, most politicians are doing politics because of the mining industry. That's where the money is. So if global mining or commodity prices collapse, it means that most mines will collapse because they will not be profitable. The cost of production might be higher than the price of the commodity itself, rendering the mining industry in Zimbabwe unprofitable, and it make it unattractive for people to hold on power. Do you know the same strategy that got used in the late 1990s against the apartheid government in South Africa? One of the reasons why they capitulated to US pressure was because the mining sector in South Africa began to fall in the late 1990s. So there was no incentive for them to hold on to South Africa anymore. So then they gave it to Mandela. It was not worth that much. So one of the things that can cause ZANU-PF to relinquish power is when it is not worth it to be in the mining industry. When the mines, even those diamond mines, they can make losses. Don't think that just because it's diamond or even gold. Don't think that is because it's a gold mine it's gonna be profitable. Sometimes prices fall drastically. And gold is got a competition. Even if we're gonna go through a recessionary pressures, you might think that maybe it's bullish for gold. These days, gold is competing against Bitcoin. Investors might find it more safer to invest in Bitcoin than in gold. They've got more other alternatives, and also investors might not like to invest in paper gold, depressing the price of paper gold. Which is there's a conspiracy there in the price of gold. So I wouldn't bet that gold might do well. So as the commodities goes, gold, platinum, everything might go down. That will provide a disincentive for ZANU-PF to carry on holding power, because it will be no use to hold on to a loss-making business, because the business of ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe is mining. Take away mining, they won't even need the power. What do we need the power for? Take away mining, if they inherit mining losses next year because of low commodity prices, and they are going into an election season with high inflation pressure, they might get to a position where they are willing to relinquish power. You understand? They be in a position where they will have to make a deal, because they're not gonna give and overpower easily. God has to make a way, and the way I'm seeing it now, the way the global economy is leading to, I think God is going to use the low commodity prices next year, high inflation rate, but plus their own infighting to bring about a change in Zimbabwe. And since there will be less demand anyway for commodities next year because of the recession. That's what the recession does. All the recession causes commodity prices to fall. So because of that, the ZANU-PF government would have had its source of funding chopped off, because its source of funding is the sale of these minerals to China, which is the global manufacturer. Trafalgar, those commodity companies that buy commodities. So if God cuts them off, because they won't be buying commodities also, because there'll be no demand for anything. So, and they also, because of other pressures of maybe good governance pressures, they might no longer may no longer want to associate themselves with ZANU-PF. They might actually sell ZANU-PF out, you know, in a scenario whereby, okay, right now the global commodity traders support ZANU-PF, even though they know that it's an oppressive government, because they are making money. They are buying commodities from Zimbabwe. They are actually able to siphon them out of the country, sometimes without paying taxes, and through crony buddy stuff, friends with the president, things like that. But come next year, when those same commodity traders do not really need commodities much, or the commodities trade is not profitable, they will drop their ZANU-PF friends. They might even sell them to the international police if they find themselves in a place where they've got no choice but to beg Zimbabwe. But here's the thing: next year, I told you that is another thing, that USA also and Europe will find themselves in a position where they will have to send out their excess dollars or euros to Africa and South America and the Caribbean. As I told you, to fight inflation, they will have to remove some of the money in their region and bring it outside the region to Africa and stuff like that. But then they will need good governance. So they will be more inspired now to remove ZANU-PF. So one way of removing ZANU-PF is to chop its global money supply, wherever they get money from. So those global companies from Western countries, when the West wants now to invest in Africa, they need a clean government. Okay, so for this thing to work, for the globe to fight inflation. So you see now, God is very clever. Now, Now, ZANU-PF is not, now, the enemy of ZANU-PF now is going to be global inflation. It's not the weak Zimbabweans. So they can have a stooge CCC and the docile Zimbabweans who are gullible to follow an opposition leader who is just selling opium, who's actually an agent of ZANU-PF. These are just lawyers. That's what lawyers do. Lawyers offer a service. These lawyers, this Tendai PT, they all of those Mahere and all of those Wanke, whatever, they're just offering a service for ZANU-PF, but keeping ZANU-PF in power by becoming their opposition as a client. This opposition thing that they're doing is just work to them. It's not, they're not in opposition so that they can take over government. That is why Chamsa doesn't have policies. You see. He doesn't have any clear direction because he knows that he's not going to be in power. He's not. His job is not to be in power. His job is to be in opposition. That is the job of those lawyers. It's a law firm. Zimbabweans, can't you just smell the coffee? That is why they are all lawyers. That's what they do. That's what lawyers do. They do the dirty work for their clients. Okay. Now, here's the thing that ZANU-PF is the problem that ZANU-PF is going to face. Now, ZANU-PF is not going to face just the Zimbabweans. Now he is going to face the global capitalists. Now the capitalists need Zimbabwe to be in good hands. Why? Because the capitalists are fighting inflation in their countries. The way the global economy works, oh God, all is the Lord. Listen very careful. I know this is it's a very complicated economic principle. You need to be an economist to understand it, and even other economists do not even understand it. This is how the global economy works. For the US or Western economies to keep on surviving crisis after crisis, they have to keep on growing. They cannot stop growing. So as I told you, in the Second World War, it was only USA. So when they found that in 1971, when on the got of the gold standard, they got the problem. What they did is that they had already invested in Europe, right? They moved on from Europe to Japan. From Japan, they went to China, Southeast Asia. Remember talking about Taiwan and South Korea, Singapore, and yeah, those are Asian tigers. That was capital growth. It has to go somewhere, otherwise they will have a crisis. So now they have that crisis. There's too much money. That too much money in one place causes inflation. For it, it's like a balloon is becoming bigger. You must pocket and let the air come out. When the air come out, it must go somewhere. So when the money comes out, it must go to a new region. So now the regions that are left in the world are like Africa. Africa is one of the regions that is left and it's underdeveloped. So that money can work in Africa. It can build roads. It can build industries. You understand? So China also is very risky for the global capital. So global capital needs Africa. So it's not colonization. It's the nature of economics. It's the nature of global capital. Capital does not have a nationality. However, if it is full in that nation, it needs to go to another nation. What happens in the United States that the capital is full in the USA. They printed more money, more capital at the same time without expanding the capacity to produce. So the countries that have got production deficits is Africa. So now, because it's now the pressures of capitalism, hear me very well. It's not the pressures of war. No. It's the pressures of capitalism, of economics more specifically. It's the pressures of economics. It's not like these capitalists, they cannot help it. They've got no choice. They've got no choice but to take American money and invest it somewhere. But now the problem is they have to be stability, because remember, when that money is being invested, it's not just government money, because government can borrow unlimited. It's private money is what that's going to be used. So private money has to make profit. It has to make sense. For it to make profit, there has to be good governance. So you see, ZANU-PF will now have to fight itself fighting against the whole global capitalism. The global capitalism will need Africa ready for investments that yield a profit. You hear what I'm saying? Yes, let me say again. USA has got a problem. They've got too much money. They need money to get out of USA to come to a country like Zimbabwe. At the same time, that money that comes is private money. It has to make profit. It's not going to come to Zimbabwe, rest there, and then when it is Zimbabwe, then it's and then ZANU-PF over Torah. ZANU-PF just takes because they are in power. Global capital what they will do is they will invade the country. See, that's how another way we can end up being in war. If ZANU-PF is in power and then the global capital come to Zimbabwe and ZANU-PF steals their money, they will come and invade the country and remove ZANU-PF by force. Or they can threaten ZANU-PF to actually negotiate an exit strategy so that we can have somebody else in power who will not steal because they need their money in good hands. That's where I come in. That's where I offer my services. You see, the Triple C is offering its own lawyer services. I'm offering my governance services, good governance, and I'm offering my services to the global capitalists. You understand? So the global capitalists will need a new government. But you see, you cannot use Triple C. Do you know why you cannot use Triple C? You cannot use Triple C because Triple C is not a government in waiting. Triple C is a company of which ZANU-PF is its client. You understand? ZANU-PF is a client of Triple C. Triple C is just there as a make-believe opposition. That is why they don't have policy. Why would you think if Chamisa is serious about taking the country next year? What doesn't he have policy? He's got no policy whatsoever, no strategy, no plan. He never talks about it whatsoever because those guys, they are lawyers. Their job is to make you believe there's an opposition when there actually is not one. So the global capital, they are very clever. They can see that ZANU-PF, there's nothing there. They're gonna steal our capital. There will be no profit there. Like they're not business people. They know Triple C is an extension of ZANU-PF, so they will need a new government. That's where I come in. That is where my position is. That's why now we have got no choice than to make me the next leader of Zimbabwe. Why? Because I do have the intellect and the ability and the foresight and the insight to stabilize the nation and the capacity to bring this global capital and actually let it rest on my hands and it grows under my watch. Do you understand? Now tell me if Chamisa can offer that. He can't. Even ZANU-PF cannot. Even ET. You see, people, what is coming next year or next year and after next year, after we've got a recession in the United Kingdom and USA, is a lot of money coming into Africa. Lots of money. It's gonna be a pressure. It's a pressure of money coming into Africa because I've been explaining to you where the money is coming from. It's because they've been excessively printing money in the past few years in America. In fact, they started in 2011 with the QE1, QE2, QE3, and QE forever. So now that money it needs to find a home and it's gonna come rushing into Zimbabwe. It's gonna come rushing into Africa. But then they need good governance. For that money to work, they need good governance. And another thing, a point that you need to understand, you don't need to understand all the economics. I know it's very complicated economics. You need to understand the lots of economic concepts. But let me tell you, this is what you must take, is this thing. These Americans and their money, they have got no choice but to take money out of USA. So when the Federal Reserve increase rates, the money goes to USA, right? But then it goes into the Federal Reserve, and then the Federal Reserve hides it underground, or so that it does not go to the public, so that there will be no money in the public. So another thing of taking the money out of the American economy is to bring it to other countries where there will be capacity. And the thing that the good thing about putting in money in other countries is that the amount of money in the Western world will go down. At the same time, global productivity will increase, thereby fighting global inflation. Because now we're fighting inflation on a global scale. It's not about each individual country fighting inflation on its own, but now it's on a global scale. So when the Western capital comes into Africa now, we are fighting inflation on a global scale. Because once the money is coming to invest in Africa and the Zimbabweans and the whole people in the region, if the region is well sorted out, they begin to have if they get paid money, they become a market. So if they are a market, they are able to buy products. So American companies can increase productivity. You know why? Because clients are not just Americans and Europeans, but it's also Africans. So in that way, as I told you, that one way of fighting inflation is increasing productivity. But then they can increase productivity because there's no clients. But if they invest in Africa, then we'll get more clients. Africa has got 1.2 billion people. So 1.2 billion people, they become a market. It means that American firms, Western firms, can increase productivity, thereby fighting inflation. You understand? So you see now, these capitalists have got no choice but to come to Africa. Okay, that money must come to Africa. Number one. Number two, they have got no choice but to come to African countries that are democratic, that are right, where there's good governance. Understand? That's number two. So, it's a matter of global order, global peace, global. Uh, so for global order, ZANU has to go. That's the conclusion. It's either ZANU has to go or ZANU has to reform. And I don't see it coming. I don't see ZANU PF reforming. I don't see ZANU PF respecting the rule of law. I don't see ZANU PF, not stealing, because essentially American capital needs respect of property rights, and people paying taxes if they have to pay tax. Governments actually getting their revenues, and governments paying back their bonds. If they buy bonds in the market, they need to get principal plus interest, without having to worry too much about the default. Understand? Companies that are going to be invested in Zimbabwe, they need to make sure that they're in an environment where there's electricity, road infrastructure for the businesses to grow, and there's democracy, that the people who are well developed in education. You see all these things, they're all coming together. All of these things that are needed. ZANU-PF doesn't have the capacity or the heart to do it. ZANU-PF doesn't have the heart to do it. They can't. And Triple C doesn't have the technical know-how, because they never invested in knowing how to govern. They invested in knowing how to become an opposition. That's what they get paid for. They get paid, those guys, for opposing. So global capital can look beyond that. Therefore, you need the third way. Yeah, no choice in Zimbabwe, but to look for a third way, a third option. Not ZANU, not Triple C. And I'm offering that the leadership for that third option, because I'm articulating these problems and giving you the solutions that will actually take the country forward. So as I'm saying, that there is a lot of global capital that is southbound, bound for Africa, but it cannot just come when Africa is a mess. Zambia is now okay, democratic-wise. Botswana is okay. South Africa, yeah, it's sort of like okay. Zimbabwe needs to be fine. When we get Zimbabwe fine, and then we're good to go. If we get Zimbabwe fine, we can handle Mozambique. Okay. Tanzania is democratic, it's fine. Rwanda is perfect. Uganda is okay. Kenya is okay. So Zimbabwe is troublesome. It's Zimbabwe and Burundi and DRC and Swaziland, where there is trouble in this region. So Zimbabwe needs to be right, and Zimbabwe has got the intellectual capacity, but we do not have the political will at the moment. ZANU-PF is still refusing. But so now I'm showing you, because I've been telling you about all the global forces, all the strategies that can come against ZANU-PF. This is also another angle. You see, walls are closing in. They have been saying that wars are closing in and walls are closing in. So next year is a defining year for ZANU-PF. If ZANU-PF finishes 2023 in power next year, 2024, they're not even going to start in power, because of the global pressure, because of this financial system. It's a global financial systemic risk. That systemic risk has to be mitigated by exporting excess American dollars to countries like Africa. And at the same time, democracy and pro-Washington policies will have to be demanded from those countries in order for them to receive this excess capacity that is coming from overprinting in the West. And ZANU-PF isn't going to be able to participate in it. Holy is the Lord. My name is Ngobani Zondo. I am the next leader of Zimbabwe. Not through the election of Zimbabwe, because the election itself is a fraud. The whole system is a fraud. I am calling out the whole electoral system in Zimbabwe as a fraud. The fact that they say that we must be 40 years to become president, it means that they're actually rigging democracy away from us who are under 40, when we do when we actually have the capacity and the willingness and the desire to lead. But them, they're older, with no capacity to lead, with no desire to actually make the country better, but they're siphoning resources for personal needs. But now I'm telling you another angle that is coming. They're going to be fighting the global economic system. The global economic system is coming to Africa, and it will take away, have to deal with despotic government. Thank you for listening. Therefore, if you're ZANU-PF and you're listening, you now have to come to the table of negotiating with me. When I said negotiate with me and my people, so that we can forge ahead a country whereby at least the people that are in power now would have a place in the new Zimbabwe. Understand? Before things get tense and nasty. But just like Moses went to Pharaoh, Pharaoh really had his heart hardened by the Lord. I believe ZANU-PF's heart is hardened. It doesn't matter what I say, but as I say what I'm saying, the pestilences are gonna keep mounting up and up and up and up until Pharaoh has no choice but to release the people of God and set them free. Holy is the Lord.